Okay. All right. Peace and wellness, family. I hope that y'all are well and happy and whole and all that good stuff. Y'all, let's get into it. Okay. The intention of this video is to unpack the cult classic film known as Eve's Bayou. The wellness community and I popped off Hoodoo Heritage Month on October 1st by having a watch party of Eve's Bayou. And after the watch party, we had a 3 hour discussion unpacking the film. So, my intention for this video is to unpack this film with the public. If you are not in the wellness community, you weren't in the discussion. You weren't there. Okay, but it's not too late. You could join and go watch the replay of the 3 hour discussion. It's definitely posted in the Patreon. However, in this video, we are going to go over not only some of the overarching themes of Eve's Bayou, but I also want to discuss some of the symbolism, the layers in the film. Okay, so let's get into it. Shout out to the wellness community, butterflies in the sky. I see y'all in the chat. I see y'all. Hey, you are. Okay, y'all. So let's get into it. So first off, let me just say, my first time seeing Eve's Bayou, the film came out in 1997. My first time seeing it, I was very young, and I didn't understand, of course, like most of this. I'm not gonna say most of the symbolism, but some of the symbolism in the film. I didn't understand the multiple layers in the film. I definitely didn't get the theme. All I knew as a little girl, I'm talking about like 8, 9 years old. All I knew as a little girl was like something happened to Cicely. This girl was essayed. And I'm going to use terms like essayed and things like that, to describe what happened to her allegedly. Okay. But all I knew is that this girl daddy done did something to her. Okay, that's all I knew as a little girl. Then, as I got older, I went back and watched the movie because I was obsessed. Even though I didn't understand the layers, the energy that the movie carried was just so powerful. It was so powerful, and I was like, okay, I need to watch this again. And I watched it time and time and time again. I can't even count how many times I've watched this film, and I feel like every time I watch it, I catch something new. So when I watched it with the wellness community and we had the discussion, even first off, while watching it, we have a chat that we're talking in the chat. And I'm in the chat like, don't spoil it, because some people hadn't seen it, some people have seen it. But even as all of us were watching it, people were still catching things that I didn't even catch. Okay. I didn't catch it. So again, a classic, many layers, so much symbolism, a great, great film. Shout out to the writer, the director, the cinematographer. The film was shot beautifully and all that. Now let's get into it starting from the beginning. So if you have never seen Eve's Bayou, if you have never seen Eve's Bayou, or you only saw it maybe a couple of times, listen. It's important to note the setting of the film. The film is set in the bayou of Louisiana in 1960s, right? Now we have to understand, in the community, afterwards, a lot of folks was like, those kids had no boundaries. They was cursing, they was drinking. And I had to explain that, like, listen, I have some friends who are from the bayou of Louisiana, and bayou living and bayou life is just different. So it's important to understand the setting. When you see the kids drinking and the kids cussing, I'm not speaking for everybody in the bayou, but for most folks in the bayou, it's just a different way of living. The bayou is deep river country. You know what I'm saying? So what they showed in the setting is exactly what it was. Now the film is about the family, who is the Baptiste family, and it's important that you pay attention to the opening, because she describes that the Baptiste are essentially a mixed race family, and it was because the mother Eve, she's the ancestor at this point. Eve was freed, and she bore children, 16 children from the owner of the land. Okay, and they gave her own land, which was known as Eve's Bayou, and they are the descendants of Eve. Okay, so that's what the film is about. Salam, stop. Diddy over here trying to play, y'all. Diddy over here trying to play. But she bore 16 children from her, and they are the descendants of Eve and Jean Paul Baptiste. Okay. Now, We are introduced to the family. They are having this party, and we really get an understanding of, the father who's a doctor, the mother who's this elegant, affluent sister. So they set the scene and let us know that this is a family who got a coin. They got some money, which is important to understand, right? Now, we're going to fast forward and just get into the main characters in the film. You have, again, the father who's a doctor. He's back in the 60s. He goes door to door. He has his briefcase and bag and everything. He goes door to door, and as he said at the end of the film, he's a hero in the eyes of some women because he served a little bit more than just medicine and aspirin to the elderly. Okay, and we get some characterization, and characterization is how you describe a character. We get some characterization of the father, knowing that he's a doctor. He's also very much beloved by the women in the family. He be cheating on the mama and all of that stuff. Eve, who is their middle child, youngest daughter, there's three children. Cicely is the oldest, who's 14 at the time. You have Eve, who's 10, and then you have the younger son. Okay. And I think the son was 9. I think it was 14, 10, and 9. Eve is named for her ancestor, okay? As many women in the family are. She points that out. Now, the oldest sister, 14, is Cicely. Cicely is very attached to her father. She's her father's favorite. And we get all of this from the opening scene at the party. The father is dancing with her. They have a very close relationship, and Eve is jealous. They definitely show that characterization as well. Eve goes and runs off later on in the party. She catches her father cheating. And again, that just sets the scene for the film. Okay. Now, we got to get into Aunt Moselle, because here's where our spirituality comes in the film. Okay, here's the spirituality. Hey, love from London. Hey, I see you. Shout out to London. This is when we get into the spirituality. And I think it's important to pay attention to this because oftentimes when we talk about Eve's Bayou, a lot of folks only talk about Aunt Moselle and her spiritual gift. But Aunt Moselle is not the only one who was spiritually gifted in the film. So Aunt Moselle is the father's sister. Okay, she's the father's sister, but she's very close to her sister-in-law, who is the mama, played by Lynn Whitfield. Aunt Moselle is played. What's the sister name who plays Aunt Moselle? Is it Debbie Morgan? So Debbie Morgan is playing Aunt Moselle, right? I think I'm saying her name is Debbie Morgan, right? Y'all let me know in the chat if I'm getting that right. Debbie Morgan plays Aunt Moselle, but she's very close with Lynn Whitfield, who plays the mama, right? Now, the thing about it is she is very well aware that her brother is cheating and does things, okay? Aunt Moselle has a spiritual gift. And not only does she have a spiritual gift, but she also, her primary job and way of life is practicing her spiritual gift, right? So essentially, she is a medium. So she has the gift of sight. Now, the way that Aunt Moselle practices her gift is she opens her hands and she allows people to touch her hands. And then she's able, through sharing energy, she's able to use one of the clairs, which is known as clairvoyance. And as we were watching the film, I was telling the family, I was like, pay attention, like, what type of clair is this? Because you actually get a chance to see what it is like to have clairvoyance and not necessarily clairaudience or claircognizance. Aunt Moselle is able to see clearly what is happening. And then she is able to tell folks what is going on. But there is no voices, there's nobody telling her what's happening. She's not talking to spirit or telling, she's getting clairvoyance. She has the gift of sight and she's able to see what's happening. And it's important to understand that difference, right? So again, Aunt Moselle is basically like the town seer. People come to her for help. And also, we pointed out in the wellness community how she also gives prescriptions, right? So one of the sisters who came to her was having financial trouble. Aunt Moselle was able to see, and when she read her, she saw that the niece had spent all the money, stolen all her money. Aunt Moselle gave her a mojo bag, and in that mojo bag, she told her to put lodestone. She told her to use 5 drops of holy oil in her right hand, and she gave her a list of herbs to put in the mojo bag. And she said, "Keep this close to your skin. Put 5 drops of holy oil in your right hand." And she also told her to put some High John the Conqueror in there, which, as we know, and I've explained to y'all, is for justice and things like that. So she gave her a mojo bag for financial justice and told her some things to do for abundance and sent her on her way. Okay, sent her on her way. So Aunt Moselle is known in the town for her spiritual gift. Now, Aunt Moselle, I want to make sure I'm not skipping any part that's important because I'm not going to, go through every scene in the movie, but I want to make sure I get the important parts. Aunt Moselle also has the gift of seeing without actually having to touch anybody. She just has the gift of clairvoyancy. So before we get to the part where she gets the vision of the train, Aunt Moselle and her sister-in-law, the mama, is walking through the market, and they're having a discussion about what the mother is going through. And wellness community, we forgot to talk about this part. And remember, I kept saying like Aunt Moselle knew that she knew what her brother was doing, because when they were walking through the market, her and the sister-in-law was having a talk, and she was telling her how to manage. The mama knew that her husband was cheating, and Aunt Moselle was telling the sister-in-law, like, listen, this what you got to do, this how you manage, it'll pass, yada yada yada. As they're walking through the market, they run into another well-known psychic in the community named Elzora. And Elzora is played by Diane Carroll. Now, when you see Elzora, she's in the thumbnail of this video. Elzora has her face painted. She has her third eye marked, and Elzora is sitting at the table. And I kept telling the community, like, pay attention to the table where she had various symbolism. She had various juju jars. She had various markings and things like that on the table. She had some bones up there. She had sticks crossed representing the crossroads. She had a variety of things on the table. So if you go back and watch the film, pause it scene by scene and pay close attention to Elzora's table. Also, rewind a little bit. In Aunt Moselle's house, they show her ancestor altar as well. Eve is looking at the ancestor altar when she's talking about, Aunt Moselle's previous husbands who have transitioned. She had an ancestor altar set up for them, okay? But peep that table when they're at the market and they walk up to Elzora. Now, Lynn Whitfield, the mama, she wants to get a reading from Elzora. Aunt Moselle is like, nah, she's a sideshow. She's a circus act. I was telling the wellness community, because this is one of the things that have been debated in Eve's Bayou for a long time, was like, what was the beef? Why didn't Aunt Moselle like Elzora? And it was funny because the wellness community, people had all of these like predictions. And again, with this movie, we are not the writers. We're not the directors. We are not the producers. So I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I'm just here to tell you what I feel and what I think and what I drew from it. I believe that their beef between Aunt Moselle and Elzora was all centered in spiritual gifts and things like that. Like who's better, who's more powerful, who's the real one and who's not. And unfortunately, this is how it has been for generations and generations in spiritual communities, of like who's right and who's wrong. Very similar to how we see it now, where you have a lot of folks who see people on social media doing tarot cards and the tuning fork readings and all of that stuff, and they feel like those are fakes, those are frauds. You have people who feel like the Miss Cleo thing and all that stuff, so that type of energy has always persisted even back in the day. And I felt like it was centered there. In that market scene, when, the mother wants to go get a reading from Elzora, and Aunt Moselle is like, nah, she's a circus act. Da-da-da-da. She ain't real, yada, yada, yada. The mother says to Aunt Moselle, she said, I feel like it's a little professional jealousy going on. And I feel like you're suffering from a little professional jealousy. And Moselle is like, no, I'm the real thing, basically. She's not. I'm the real thing. I do real reading. She's not. She said that woman couldn't see the sun on a hot day in Louisiana or something like that. She said, like trying to be funny. But essentially, we see that there's a beef between Aunt Moselle and Elzora. Yes, someone put the light versus the dark. We talked about that in the discussion as well, because Aunt Moselle, in the eyes of some, would be considered more of a light worker, and Elzora would be considered more of, someone who dabbles in left-hand work or darker magic, right? Where she's willing to work with, darker energies to get things done. And we see that come to pass at the end of the movie when allegedly Eve went to her to get some work done against her daddy. But we'll get there, okay? But long story short, the mother sits down and Elzora starts to read her. Now, this is an important a distinction to make, right, when we're talking about the spiritual gifts of this movie. Because notice what I said about Aunt Moselle. She has the gift of clairvoyancy. She's able to see clearly what's happening, not necessarily clairaudience, where she's hearing them tell her what's to come, not necessarily claircognizance, where she just gets the divine knowing. She literally sees what is coming. Now with Elzora, Elzora gives overall, and I was explaining to the community, like for some people, that's just how their spiritual gifts are. They can't necessarily see the details of what's happening or who it is, but they can tell you that something is coming. So Elzora tells the mother essentially, like, listen, what's happening is you are sad, you are going through some things, but in 3 years' time, you'll be happy. You need to look to your children. She didn't go in detail. She didn't tell her why she was sad. She didn't tell her what exactly was going on. She didn't go in any type of detail. She just said, right now you're sad. In 3 years' time, you'll be happy. You need to look to your children. And the mother was like, what should I do? What should I do? And Elzora said, sometimes a soldier falls on his own sword. There's nothing you need to do. Basically telling her there's nothing you need to do. A soldier falls on his own sword. Remember that. Remember that. Elzora tells the mother, a soldier falls on his own sword. As this reading is happening, Aunt Moselle is now a believer of Elzora. Remember, she thought she was a fraud. She thought she was a fake. She's now a believer because she knows what her brother is doing. She knows that the mother is sad. They was just talking about it walking through the market. She knows what's going on. So now she's like, oh, this woman knows something. She knows something. So now Aunt Moselle sits down for a reading. She pays the woman her $1 in the jar, sits down for a reading. And Elzora is like, I don't need to read you. I know what's going on with you. Basically telling her, you are a black widow. You'll never be with a man. Every time you with a man, he gonna die. And Aunt Moselle gets very upset, tells her she's evil, tries to flip the table. Again, pointing out that issue that they have. Now, we have to keep in mind, Aunt Moselle does have a history. She had 2 husbands and a lover, and all 3 of them had transitioned. They had passed away, and that's who she had the ancestor altar for, right? Now, as they're leaving the market, Aunt Moselle gets a vision. And that's why I said it's important to keep in mind the spiritual gifts, because Aunt Moselle is not holding anybody's hand. She's not tapping into anybody. She just has the gift of what, as the old folks say, she got the gift of sight, where she's able to just kind of see what's going on, see what's happening, see what's coming. Okay. So she's walking, she gets this vision that kids is going to get hit by a train. Somebody going to get hit by a train. They run home and they basically tell all 3 of the kids, Cicely, Eve, and the youngest brother, that they need to stay. They're going to have to stay in the house. They can't go out until the vision comes to pass, right? This for me, this points out the fact that they believe. This is not a situation where people doubt Aunt Moselle, where they don't believe in her. The mama and the grandmother, the mother of the mother who also lives with them, they believe in Aunt Moselle's gifts. Okay, so it's important to note that. The father, though, the one who's cheating, he questions her gift. He tries to cast some doubt. He's like, y'all gonna keep the kids trapped in the house this whole time? How y'all gonna keep them trapped in the house the whole time? Like, it don't make sense. And the mother is like, no, she had a vision. And he's like, she's also been in the mental, she's not a stranger to a mental hospital, insinuating that he thinks that Aunt Moselle is crazy. She don't really have a gift. Okay. Now, it's important to note what happens here. The oldest daughter, Cicely, is now showing a lot of defiance towards the mother at this point, right? We can tell that she has a strange attachment to her father, right? She cares for him deeply. He's her favorite child. We already by this point know that their relationship is a bit weird, okay? They're supposed to be in the house. The kids is not supposed to go out. Cicely, the oldest daughter, played by Megan Good. And come on, we talked about this in the community, the amount of beautiful Black stars in this film, okay? Megan Good plays Cicely. She leaves the house without consent, disappears. When she returns home, she has gotten her hair cut and done like the mama. She's gotten her hair done like the mama. So now she's trying to look like her mother. And this is when we get introduced to this idea, this concept that this girl may be in love with her father, right? She may be in love with her father. Like she's trying to look like her mother. She's always challenging the mother. She even told the mother at one point, if he divorces us, I'm blaming you, and keep in mind that language, if he divorces us, including herself, she said, I'm blaming you, So now she's trying to look like her mother. The mother confronts her. The mother slaps her, sends her to her room. Eve runs up to the room. She discovers Cicely's underwear and sees that Cicely has gotten her menstrual. 1 second, y'all. Okay, I'm back. So she sees that Cicely has gotten her period. And I say Cicely has gotten her period because she picks up her underwear and she sees blood in Cicely's underwear, right? Now, this part has caused a lot of controversy because of what is revealed toward the end of the film, right? Now, we have the understanding that the father is cheating on the mother. The mother is aware of it. The mother is trying to keep it together for the kids and everything like that. Aunt Moselle has a spiritual gift. We have to remember that Aunt Moselle and Elzora aren't the only ones with spiritual gifts. Fast or rewind rather to the beginning of the film, where when they have that opening scene at the party, Aunt Moselle has a husband there, right? The husband drives off. The next scene, Eve is sleeping. When she's sleeping, she has a dream that something happens to the husband. Y'all, this too is a spiritual gift. This too is a spiritual gift. To have the gift of sight in dreams is a spiritual gift. Okay. So I was pointing out to the community, like, a lot of folks, when they talk about Eve's Bayou, they only talk about Aunt Moselle's spiritual gifts, and everybody love Aunt Moselle, and they talk about Elzora, but we forget that in the beginning, we know that Eve has the spiritual gift of sight because she has the dream that the husband is going to pass. She jumps out of the dream and she holds a coin that he gave her before he left. So, and then the next scene, he passes and they're at his funeral. So we know that Eve has the spiritual gift of sight. So Aunt Moselle has the spiritual gift of clairvoyancy in the conscious mind, where she's awake and she gets visions. She can also transfer energy. She also gives prescriptions like mojo bags and all of that. Elzora throws bones. That's how she's able to get her gift of sights, right? So she throws bones and she reads the bones. That too is a part of a spiritual gift, right? And then you have Eve, who has the spiritual gift of sight through dreams. Through dreams. So 3 spiritual gifts that show up 3 different types of ways. Okay, 3 spiritual gifts that show up 3 different types of ways. Okay, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Now, we know Eve has this gift of sight, right? She picks up her sister's bloody, underwear, and she says, "Oh, she got her period. She got Cicely's period. Cicely got her period." Da, da, da. She run downstairs and tells the mother. The mother tells the father, and she's like, "She didn't even tell me." The father's basically dismissive, like, "Oh, she'll be all right. It's just a thing, yada yada yada." Okay. Now, Salam, stop it. Stop. Y'all, Salam keep trying to play. He keeps trying to play. Okay. But yeah, so she keeps on, the father keeps on dismissing it, and he's like, she's all right. Da, 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 da. Now, this is when things get interesting. Okay, because we find out that Cicely has been waiting up for her father. We find this out. The mother tells Cicely, "You can't wait up for him no more. You can't wait up for him no more." Cicely's upset. That's when Cicely tells her, "If he divorces us, I'm blaming you." Red flag, red flag. Okay. Now, I'm just going to skip towards the end of the movie, okay? Because for the rest of the movie, we see Eve goes, she goes to the doctor with her father. She goes on his doctor's runs with her father and everything like that. Eve is also trying to she goes to the market. She sees the father's mistress, the one that she caught her father messing with, she sees the father's mistress's husband in the market. This is important to note. And she tells the husband, she basically insinuates that you better watch your wife. You need to watch what's going on. She tells the husband, like, Maddie is the mistress. She says, Maddie don't seem like the lonely type. My father ain't the lonely type either, but my mama get real lonely, insinuating that, like, hey, my daddy be out late. Your wife don't seem lonely. My father don't seem lonely, but my mama be lonely. So, basically hinting you better be careful. So and you can physically see the husband start thinking and contemplating. So she puts this little oomph of doubt. Now, Cicely and community, if I'm missing any important parts, tell me. Look. People are already saying, sister, I think Cicely was pregnant. Okay, folks is already saying things. Okay, folks is already saying things, and listen, we're gonna talk about it now. Fast forward. Eve is at this point, she's alarmed about what's going on. She knows her daddy is cheating. She wants to put a stop to it. She tries to tell her mother, like, daddy ain't just going to see patients. He's doing more than seeing patients. And I know that for sure. Eve gets in trouble. She gets sent up. It's a whole thing. Aunt Moselle takes Eve upstairs and talks to her and, like, basically telling her, you need to relax and calm down. Now, it's important to note the relationship between Aunt Moselle and Eve, because Eve has a spiritual gift. I think Aunt Moselle kind of knows that. Eve is also blessed to be able to watch and observe Aunt Moselle as she's doing her things, right? So, like, as she's doing her readings and her consultations, Eve is there watching and listening. She's looking at the ancestor altar and all of that. Now, it's important to note this because Eve, as I said, is gifted herself. So she's in tune. Aunt Moselle is spiritually gifted. Aunt Moselle has like this mentoring relationship with Eve almost. And we never see Aunt Moselle have that relationship with Cicely as much. We never see her like go and sit with Cicely and like mentor her in the way that she does Eve. Okay. So you could tell Eve is like her baby. And that's important, right? Because she kind of opens her up to another aspect of her gift towards the end. But again, Eve is concerned about what her father is doing. Eve and Cicely end up having a conversation, right? Where Cicely tells Eve that the father did something to her. The father essayed her. The father assaulted her. He abused her. Okay. She tells Eve that this has happened. Eve is furious. Eve immediately is like, something got to be done. I got to do something. Eve goes to talk to Elzora, the bone thrower. Okay. She goes talk to Elzora. And basically, she gets a piece of her father's hair out of his comb. She takes it to Elzora and she's like, I want something done. I need something done. She gives Elzora $20. $20. Elzora takes it. She takes the piece of hair, but she tells Eve, think about it. Do you really want to do this? You have until Thursday. Come back Thursday and tell me if you really want to do this. So she sends Eve away to think about it. This was a powerful part of the movie. Because as I was telling the community, I said, for the people who do left hand work or work with darker energies and who do that type of work, you shouldn't do those things willy-nilly. Elzora told Eve, you need to think about if you really want to do this. Think about if you really want to make this happen. Go home and think about it. Now, keep in mind, Eve has already put the little question into Maddie, the mistress's husband. Eve is clearly upset. She's found out that her father has been abusing her sister, so she's clearly upset. She wants something done to him. Eve is sure for a moment. Eve goes and talks to Aunt Moselle and she asks Aunt Moselle, she said, Aunt Moselle, can you kill somebody with voodoo? And Aunt Moselle is like, what? Who do you want to kill with voodoo? What are you talking about? What's going on? And she puts her hands out to read Eve. Opens her hands, give me your hands. Eve puts her hands, and this is an important scene. She lays her hands on top of Aunt Moselle's. Aunt Moselle literally has her hands for all of 2 seconds, and then Aunt Moselle snatches back. Clearly, Aunt Moselle saw something she didn't want to see. Now, we couldn't see, but she clearly saw something she wanted to see because Aunt Moselle snatches back. So she didn't want to see whatever it was she saw, right? She tells Eve, that's crazy. You can't kill nobody with voodoo. That's crazy. Eve runs off, right? Now, Eve has had some time to think. Fast forward, she goes to Elzora and she tries to tell Elzora, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want this to happen. We are now at the end of the movie where the father and Maddie are at a bar. They had a little speakeasy, a little juke joint. Eve walks in. She tells Daddy, you got to go. Daddy, you got to go. Let's go. Let's go home. Dad is like, all right. He has Eve. And then all of a sudden we see Maddie, the mistress's husband, coming down. Maddie, the mistress husband, tells the dad, Sam Jackson, she tells him, he tells him, don't say nothing else to my wife. Don't speak another word to my wife. The two parties, Eve and Sam, the daddy, are walking away. Maddie and her husband are walking away. Sam Jackson turns back and says, good night, Maddie. The husband reaches in his coat and he shoots the father, Sam Jackson, and he's done. He's dead. Okay. So this leaves the watcher thinking and believing that whatever Eve did, because Eve went to Elzora. When she went back to Elzora, she told Elzora, I don't want to do it no more. I don't want to do it no more. I don't want it to happen. Elzora says, it's too late. I already did the work. She said, I put his hair in the belly of a snake and I buried it in your family's grave. Eve said, where did you bury it? She said, you'll never find where I buried it. It's already done. She starts laughing. Eve runs off, and that's when she goes to the bar. So, and then this whole thing happens. So this leaves the watcher believing that, whatever Eve did, it told Elzora to do, and Elzora did, it worked, and now the father is gone. They go to his funeral. At the funeral, Eve looks over and she sees Elzora at a distant spot in the family graveyard. Then Elzora disappears and there's nothing there. Keep that in mind. Now, they're in grief. Eve starts going through her father's doctor's bag. Eve finds a letter. That letter is addressed to Moselle. And in the letter, the father is explaining, it's been a couple hours since our conversation. I have now calmed down enough to tell you how I feel and what happened. He goes on to explain that this night where the sister, and we get a vision of what happened according to the sister story, this night where, the sister said he abused her, the father is explaining in the letter, actually what happened was she tried to kiss me. I pushed her off, slapped her when I realized she was kissing me like a grown woman. I pushed her off, slapped her. She was upset. She ran to her room. And that's what happened. So he basically denies everything. He admits that he's been having affairs and all of that, but denies everything that happened in the letter. Eve was reading the letter. She's shocked. She confronts Cicely. She goes and confronts Cicely. When she confronts Cicely, Cicely is basically like, he hurt me. I don't know what happened. And Eve is like, you are a liar. You are a liar. And she's showing her the letter. And then, Cicely's like, I don't know. And Eve is like, give me your hands. So the same spiritual gift that she's seen Aunt Moselle practice, the same spiritual gift that Aunt Moselle has practiced even on Eve, when Eve asked her, can you kill somebody with voodoo? And Aunt Moselle read Eve. The same spiritual gift Eve is now practicing. So we knew Eve was already gifted because she had the gift of sight in the dream. But now she says, give me your hand. And she reads Cicely. When she reads Cicely, all she can see is that there was a kiss. They look at each other. Then it skips to a slap. He did slap her. She fell to the ground and she ran off. But we still don't get to see the detail of what was the kiss, what happened, what's the background, what is the details of the relationship. We still don't get to see. Okay. Eve hugs Cicely. They decide to float the letter away, basically put the letter in the river and release it to the water. They release the letter to the water, okay? And the movie ends. Now, the wellness community, I kept playing this part over and over and over how the movie ends. Because when the movie ends, the same monologue that the narrator, who is Eve, gives in the beginning, she gives in the end. But shout out to the wellness community because one of the sisters pointed out this little difference that makes a big difference. Now, before I say it, most folks, when they leave the movie, you leave thinking that this man was cheating on his wife, he was molesting his daughter. You know, the youngest daughter found out. She went and got some root work done against him, and he ended up getting killed by the mistress's husband. Boom. That's what you think, for most folks. But is that what happened? The beautiful thing about this film, because the great debate has been for years, did the father really do something to Cicely? Was Cicely lying? Was Cicely just trying to become her mother? And actually, the father was right. Like she tried to advance upon him and he rejected her. And because he rejected her, she was upset and lied to Eve. Like what happened? Or was the father actually doing something to her? In the film starts with the narrator, who is Eve, saying, My sister Cicely was 14. I was 10. My brother was 9. This is the story about how I killed my father. That's how it starts in the beginning. The summer I killed my father, right? She says, the truth changes color depending on the light. The truth changes color depending on the light. Then at the end of the film, she repeats the same monologue, but then she says, this is the story of the last time my father said goodnight. She didn't say I killed my father. She said, this is the story of the last time my father said goodnight. And one of our wellness community members pointed that nuance out because it is important. And then she says again, the truth changes color depending on the light. Family, what really happened? What really happened? Let's talk about the possibilities. Possibility number 1. Cicely wanted to save her family. She's a 14-year-old girl. She's in puberty. She has all of these emotions. She wants to save her family. She is very close to her father. Her fear is that her father is going to leave the family. Her emotional, hormonal, pubescent 14-year-old self thinks that, okay, maybe if I become the woman that my father gives his attention to, then maybe he will stay. Maybe I can do better. Maybe I can do something that my mother isn't doing. If I become this type of woman, I can get my father to stay. She advances upon her father. He rejects her. She's hurt. When confronted by Eve about what's going on, why have you been acting like this, she tells this lie. And we know that Cicely has the ability to be a liar because in the beginning of the film, when Eve tells Cicely that she caught their father with Maddie in the barn having an affair, Cicely creates this whole fake story that she wants Eve to believe. Okay, she creates this whole story that she wants Eve to believe. So we already get the foreshadowing that Cicely is maybe a liar. Okay, we get this detail that Cicely may be a liar. She creates this whole narrative, gives details, walk through, right? She has the ability, yes. She has the ability to change Eve's perception. It's possible that Cicely made up that whole abuse story because she wanted to change Eve's perception. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that Cicely was telling the truth The other possibility is that Cicely is just a young girl who was close to her daddy. What's wrong with the father and daughter dancing together like we see in the beginning of the film? It's nothing inappropriate about that, or is it? Or is it? Maybe Cicely is telling the truth. Maybe, yeah, her and her father were close. She trusted him, but he was grooming her. He was grooming Cicely, right? Maybe that night he did abuse her. Maybe he took it as far as snatching her virginity. Maybe the blood in her pants wasn't a period. Maybe it was the results of the abuse he had endured. She had endured. Maybe Cicely was telling the truth. Maybe the father lied when he wrote that letter. Aunt Moselle, when she held her hands out to read Eve, clearly Aunt Moselle saw something because she confronted her brother that she protected the whole film. The whole film, she protected her brother. She knew her brother was cheating. She was trying to convince his wife to stay. This is just what men do. It'll be okay. Don't worry. Don't worry. Right? Moselle confronts the father. He got to cover it up. He writes this letter, but gets killed before he gets a chance to send it. Maybe Cicely was telling the truth. Maybe that night her father had abused her. Cicely was torn. She was broken. Maybe Cicely was telling the truth. When Eve went to Elzora to do the work, she was right. She did it justifiably. She was protecting her sister who was actually being abused. That's the second possibility. Cicely was telling the truth. Then there's a third possibility that gets introduced by the director's cut of the film. Yes, there is a director's cut of this film. The director's cut came out in, I want to say like 2015, 2016-ish, right? On DVD. If y'all got a Walmart, live by Walmart, it was in the big Walmart bins, the director's cut. And it very rare release. And you get to see some of the deleted scenes from the whole film. In the director's cut, there is a Uncle Tony who is mute. He's mute. He's in a wheelchair. He can barely communicate. He can say a couple words, but he barely communicates, right? The director's cut, the deleted scenes insinuate that Uncle Tony, that night, the night in question, Uncle Tony saw what happened. In the director's cut, it insinuates that Uncle Tony either made a sound or dropped a glass. Cicely, the father, were kissing. A sound is made, they hear it. The father pushes Cicely off and slaps her to save face. This introduces the third possibility that maybe there was some type of affair that was happening between Cicely and the father, which would still, let's be clear, this would still be considered molestation, sexual abuse, rape, because she is 14. So this does not give him a pass. He would still be an abuser. But there's some type of affair, and this explains why Cicely was trying to become her mother. She thought she was the wife. Cicely thought she was in a relationship with her father. Cicely thought that she was the woman. If there was an affair between Cicely and the dad, then they get caught by the Uncle Tony. He pushes her off and rejects her and slaps her. Cicely is hurt. How could you reject me? How could you push me off to save face? I thought you loved me. I am your woman. I am your wife. I am the one. How could you reject me to save face? Right? Cicely runs off. That's why when she tells Eve she's hurt, she's been abused, technically she's right. Cicely realizes he doesn't see me as his wife. He doesn't see me as his woman. He's been abusing me. That's the third possibility. So, what really happened? Was Cicely lying? Was Cicely actually abused and taken advantage of that night? Or were Cicely and her dad having an affair? Still abuse, but were they having an affair and Cicely was just hurt because she wasn't who she thought she was as his woman. What happened? What do you think? The truth changes color depending on the light. The beautiful thing about Eve's Bayou is it points out a narrative that we see in families from generation to generation to generation. When we're having this discussion about this film, people debate. She lied. She's telling the truth. You got to believe her. You shouldn't believe her. Truth changes color depending on the light. What I had to realize was that my light is a bit different. If you are a person who has dealt with abuse, you've dealt with sexual trauma, you are more inclined to believe a victim immediately without question. She said that's what happened to her. That's what happened to her. We cast no doubt. You got to believe her. That's your light. The truth changes color depending on the light. You may automatically see the way the father was treating Cicely as grooming. He was grooming her. Why was he that close to her? That's inappropriate. But your trauma tells you that. Your trauma sees a father and daughter dancing together at a party, and you may sexualize it because you automatically have the lens and the light of someone who was sexually abused. The truth changes color depending on the light. You believe Cicely. You see her as being groomed. You think that, hey, that relationship between her and her father was inappropriate. That's your that's your light. The truth changes color depending on the light. Or you are a person who never has dealt with sexual abuse, or maybe, it's just not something that is at the forefront of your perspective when you are observing father daughter relationships. You heard what the father said. You believe him. You believe that Cicely was lying. You see some of Cicely's behaviors. You like, that was weird. She wanted to become her mother. Cicely clearly has issues. It's something going on with Cicely. That girl was lying. She's a liar. She lied in the beginning to Eve when Eve told her that daddy was cheating. She lied and created this fake narrative. Clearly, it's something going on with Cicely. I don't believe her. Cicely lied. That daddy ain't do nothing to her. That is your light. The truth changes color depending on the light. You are not automatically inclined to believe Cicely. You are not automatically inclined to believe what she's saying happened and what she said is the truth. That's your light. Or do you believe that maybe it was a mutual relationship? Now you hear about this director's cut, whether you saw it or not, you now want to go see it. You hear about this director's cut and you believe that maybe there's a third possibility. Maybe there was something mutual going on. The truth changes color depending on the light. The powerful thing about this film, we don't know. We don't know for sure. And as I said, I think in many families, this has happened where you have a young person who says that something happened to them. Some family members believe and some family members don't. Sometimes it's a family debate. When there's a beloved person in the family, as the daddy was, and a kid comes and says, hey, he did something to me. This happens in families, in reality. This ain't no film. This ain't no movie. This is a reflection of real life. And some folks in the family say she's lying. Some folks says he did do it. I know he's like that. He has a history of being promiscuous. Look at him. Their relationship is inappropriate. He was grooming her. Something did happen. We believe her. We telling the truth. The truth changes color depending on the light. Sometimes how we view things is influenced by our light, our perspective, our experiences, our own traumas, the things that we have been conditioned to believe and taught. That is your light. What you believe is the truth changes color depending on the light. There's multiple possibilities of what could be true here. And I think that's the theme of the film. It was said in the beginning and it's now said at the end. The truth changes color depending on the light, right? So we have multiple possibilities of what could be true. Multiple. And I think the writers, the producers, the cinematographers did a great job of really pushing that narrative. Because to this day, Eve's Bayou is that film that folks debate and they go back and forth with, is it true? Was she lying? Did it really happen? All the time. All the time. But the interesting thing is, not only is that is not the only part of the film that is up for debate or discussion of what is the truth. Another part, did Eve actually kill her father? Was it the work that Elzora did that actually killed the dad? Or was it just his karma? In the beginning of the film, when the mother sits down and talks to Elzora, this is before Eve went to Elzora to do anything. In the beginning, when the mother sits down, Elzora tells the mother, "You are sad right now. In 3 years' time, you'll be happy. Look to your children." The mother asks, "Well, what should I do? How will I get happy?" She said, "You don't need to do anything. Sometimes a soldier falls on his own sword. You don't need to do anything. A soldier falls on his own sword. No work needed to be done. His own sword. The jail he set for you is the one that he will rot in," is basically what she said. He will fall on his own sword. Fast forward, Eve goes to Elzora. And it's a possibility that Elzora was just trying to teach Eve a lesson. A lot of folks in the community, we was having this discussion, they was like, Elzora, she was greedy. She just snatched Eve's $20, knowing that she only charges $1. She took Eve's money and she did this work. It's possible that as an elder, spiritually gifted person, you know when a kid has the gift. It's possible that Elzora was trying to teach Eve a lesson of discipline, a lesson of minding your vengeful spirit. It's possible that Elzora didn't do any work. Elzora already knew what was coming. She had already read the mama. She told the mama, a soldier falls on his own sword. Elzora didn't need to do nothing. She knew the daddy was going to get what was coming to him. She was just trying to teach Eve a lesson. And that's why she told Eve, you need to think about, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to kill this person? Go home and think about it. Go home and think about it. And when Eve ran back and told her, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Elzora was again trying to teach a lesson. It's already done. It's too late. You got to be careful what you ask for. Be careful what you wish for. I already did it. And then boom, the father is killed. Now Eve is blaming herself, thinking that she did this to her daddy. It's possible that the father fell on his own sword. It's possible. It's also possible that Eve, even if Elzora didn't do any work, Eve did play a part in killing her father when she planted that seed in Maddie's husband at the market. She planted that seed in Maddie's husband at the market. Maddie's husband came, he was vengeful, he was upset, he was angry. The father still fell on his own sword because he said, that man told him, don't you say nothing else to my wife. And he said goodnight to Maddie, and Maddie's husband killed him. But it's possible that Eve did play a part in that karma, right? Elzora maybe still didn't do no work. Or there's a third possibility that Elzora did do some work and Eve did kill her father. But I think that's why it's important that our sister Queen pointed out in the discussion where in the beginning of the film, it starts out with Eve saying, this is the night, this is the summer I killed my father. And then at the end of the film, she says, let me tell you about the last time my father said good night. The truth changes color depending on the light. Who knows what really did it? Was it the work? Was it Eve going to Elzora? Elzora actually did the work that she described, put his hair in the belly of a snake, buried it in the family's backyard. Is that what it was? Or was it just the father's own karma? A soldier falls on his own sword, like Elzora said in the beginning. Maybe it was his karma. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was that little seed that Eve had planted. Maybe she played a part in the karma, or maybe she played a part in the work that was done. What really happened? The truth changes color depending on the light. That is the theme of Eve's Bayou. That is the theme of Eve's Bayou. So these years and years and years of debates was Cicely telling the truth. No, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. You're right. I'm wrong. I'm right. You're wrong. This whole back and forth of who's right, what really happened. Y'all, it's not meant for us to know for sure. It's meant for us to have the discussion, just like the discussion has been had in families for generation upon generation upon generation. So many times this has occurred. So many times children have come forward and said, hey, something happened to me. And people debate whether or not they are telling the truth. So many times people have, you know, wanted to do some work against somebody or wish death upon somebody, and something happens to that person, and then they feel guilty about whether or not they was it because I wished it on this person, is it because I said this, is it because I did this, or did that person just suffer from their own karma? Eve's Bayou is a brilliant film that reflects the truth of generational trauma, the truth of these deep, dark discussions that happen in Black family, the truth of the questions that are left after allegations are made. It also does a great job of forcing us to look at our own light. There's people who are even watching this right now, and they're like, Queen, why don't you believe her? Why don't you just say he did it? But sometimes you feel that way because nobody believed you. And you wish that when you said that something happened to you, your family would have stood for you and they would have believed you and there would have been no doubt. You want people to believe Cicely because you see Cicely in you. You see you in Cicely. I'm Cicely. That's me. Nobody believed me. What if somebody would have came and saved me and helped me like Eve did? That's your light. A lot of folks get very emotional about this film. They get very emotional with this conversation. You can go all over social media and you can see it. There's folks who are like, this is the problem in Black families. Eve's Bayou should not be up for debate. The father was an abuser. He was grooming her. But as I told the community, and I myself had to be challenged, if you take that lens off, right? What is sexual about a father dancing with a daughter? Why do we automatically see that as grooming before we have this revelation or this allegation that Cicely made before? Because again, we don't know what happened with the kiss. Before we see any of that, all you see is the father dancing with the daughter. Why do you automatically feel like this is inappropriate? Why do you see a father hugging a daughter and feel like this is inappropriate and that's grooming? That is your light. That is your light. You see what I'm saying? So oftentimes we see these things and we see just life as a whole from our own perspective, our own light. The truth changes color depending on the light, and we want to debate our truths. We want to debate what actually happened. Only thing we find out in the end, when Eve holds out her hands and she reads Cicely, only thing we know for sure is there was a kiss and there was a slap and Cicely was upset. But we don't know how intimate the kiss was. We don't know if the kiss was mutual. We don't know the history of how long this has been happening or if there's a history at all. The film leaves this open space for you to step into your light and decide what do you think is true. And we do this in life. We do this in life. Our color changes our experiences. It impacts our experiences, and we judge our experiences based on our color, our perspective, our experiences, our trauma, our conditioning, our beliefs. That is what impacts your perspective, also known as your color. The truth changes color depending on the light. That is what impacts your light. So you adjust the truth or you judge what is true based on your own light. based on your own light. So overall, family, Eve's Bayou is a great film. It's a film that, again, just reflects the truth of families, the possibilities of what the truth could be, how different perspectives are impacted by experiences and trauma, and that therefore impacts the color of the truth for you. It also talks about and shows a variety of beautiful spiritual gifts and symbolism and mojo bags and the power of root work and elders disciplining a child potentially and showing them how to mind their vengeful spirit, especially when that child is spiritually gifted. Be mindful of the power of the tongue, going to get readings and seeing them be coming to pass, the value of trusting a reader like they did with Aunt Moselle when she had that vision of the train and a child being injured by the train, and it came to pass. Aunt Moselle even taking accountability when she's having that conversation with Eve at the end. And Aunt Moselle is finally taking accountability for how her own actions have impacted her past relationships. So maybe she's not a Black widow when she talks about having that dream of flying and seeing herself drowning. And essentially, she insinuates that she has to save herself. I got to keep flying. Yes, I've been through these things in the past. Yes, I see myself drowning, but I can't focus on that. I got to save me. I got to keep flying. I got to save myself. I got to change my behaviors and focus on looking to the future. And she teaches that to Eve. And then Eve and Cicely decide to just float the letter and fly. We are just going to go forward. We're not going to keep on harping on this and wondering what happened and what didn't happen. We are just going to go forward. So many layers of lessons and just powerful symbolism and messages in Eve's Bayou. It is a great film. And I'll simply say, or I'll ask rather, what is your light? What is your light? The truth changes color depending on the light. What is your light? How does your conditioning, your trauma, your past experiences impact how you view and judge the world, how you view and judge experiences? Some folks, some men may be watching this and they have been the one accused, falsely accused, possibly. So they identify with the father. When they're watching this film, that is their light. Some people have been the ones abused. They wish somebody would have believed them. When they're watching the film, that is their light. And the truth changed color depending on their light. What is your light? Therefore, what is your truth? I love y'all, family. Right now in the wellness community, we are watching two things. So we are watching a series called The Changeling on Apple TV. And we are on today. We are watching episode 2 and 3. We watched episode 1 last night and it was so good. And we've been having discussions about that. We'll continue to have discussions about that. And we are also, our next doc that we'll be watching for Hoodoo Heritage Month is the United States of Hoodoo. We'll be watching that as a collective and discussing that as well. Join the wellness community. The link is down here. Okay, the link is down here. And watch Eve's Bayou again with all of this in mind. With all of this in mind, watch it again and truly, truly consider your light. Consider what you feel and believe may be true. Okay, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm just here to push your thinking. I'm just here to push your thinking. Okay. I want to shout out to the folks who have blessed me via Cash App. Shout out to Kalista and TJ War. I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you for the love and family. I'll see y'all soon. Wellness community, I'll see y'all tonight at 8 o'clock for our watch party. Okay, y'all. And if you are new to the wellness community, again, you can go back and watch the full 3-hour discussion of Eve's Bayou. The replay is available there as well. Okay, y'all. Peace. Much love, family.